Living alone is better for your soul than most people will ever admit. It's not just about being alone. It's about choosing to be alone. And that choice, it changes everything. But why do most people fear being alone? Is it truly the absence of others that disturbs us? Or is it the fear of facing our own selves in the silence? Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist, understood something crucial about the human experience. We can only truly heal, grow, and transform when we face ourselves, when we sit with the parts of us that we often run away from. And sometimes, the most profound transformations come when we are alone, not lonely, but in solitude. We're constantly taught that connection is the highest form of fulfillment, that love is the solution to all of life's problems. So the idea that solitude could be better for your soul than any relationship might feel odd, maybe even a little unsettling. It goes against everything we're conditioned to believe, doesn't it? But what if the absence of others is exactly what allows you to become the most complete, most authentic version of yourself? You see, when we are alone, there are no distractions, no noise to fill the space, and it's in that quiet, in that emptiness, that the most important work begins. Because the truth is, we've been conditioned by society to believe that solitude is something to fear, something to avoid. We're taught that being alone is a sign of failure, that if we're not in a relationship, there's something wrong with us. But Carl Jung knew that this couldn't be further from the truth. For Jung, solitude wasn't a curse. It was a path to understanding ourselves on a deeper level. When we are constantly surrounded by others, when we're always in relationships, whether romantic, familial, or social, we start to lose touch with who we truly are. We begin to define ourselves through the eyes of others, seeking validation, approval, and acceptance from people outside ourselves. But here's the catch. When we lose sight of our own essence, when we forget who we are without anyone else's influence, we stop living authentically. Think about it for a moment. When was the last time you were truly alone, without any distractions, without any expectations from the outside world? When was the last time you had the space to sit with your own thoughts, to truly reflect on who you are and what you need? It's hard, isn't it? The silence feels uncomfortable, almost unbearable at times. But it's in that silence, in that discomfort, that we begin to heal. We begin to confront the parts of ourselves we've been avoiding. And yes, it's hard. Facing our unresolved emotions can be deeply unsettling, but it's also liberating. Because in that quiet, we are given the opportunity to reconnect with our true selves. And when we are finally able to face the parts of us that we've been running from, we can begin the process of healing. We can let go of the past, of old emotional imprints, of rejections and abandonment that we've carried with us for so long. Jung understood something most people overlook. Real healing doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't come from other people, from relationships, from validation. It comes from within. And sometimes, the only way to access that deep well of healing is through solitude. It's in the moments when we are alone, when there is no one else to perform for, that our true self can begin to emerge. But here's the thing, we often don't want to face ourselves. It's uncomfortable. It's painful. So instead, we fill the silence with distractions. We seek constant company. We look for validation in the eyes of others. We search for someone to complete us. We're afraid to be alone because it forces us to confront the parts of us that we'd rather leave buried. But when we run from solitude, we run from the opportunity to truly heal. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, but I don't want to be alone. I want connection. I want love. And that's natural. We all crave connection. It's part of being human. But what if the very connection you're seeking is waiting for you inside yourself? What if the love you've been chasing from others can only truly be found when you first learn to love yourself? Solitude isn't about being isolated or lonely. It's not about shutting yourself off from the world or rejecting relationships altogether. It's about creating space for yourself to reconnect with your own soul, to find your own center, to heal the wounds that no one else can heal for you. And when you do that, when you truly embrace your own wholeness, the relationships that come into your life will be richer, more fulfilling, and more authentic. You see, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the gift of solitude, and that's where the real magic happens. Because when you stop depending on others to define who you are, when you stop seeking validation from the outside world, you can finally start living as your true, authentic self. And when you do that, you will begin to attract relationships that are in alignment with your true essence, not because you need someone to complete you, but because you are already whole. We live in a world that rarely slows down. Being alone is seen as a problem to fix, not a choice to respect. But there's a real difference between feeling lonely and choosing quiet. And that choice? It can change the way you see yourself. Loneliness stems from the feeling of needing someone or something outside ourselves to feel complete. Solitude, on the other hand, is a conscious choice to be with yourself. It's about choosing to take a step back from the noise of the world, from the pressure of social expectations, to reconnect with who you are beneath the surface. In solitude, you're not avoiding anything. You're not running away from the world. You're actually engaging in one of the most important forms of self-care possible, the act of getting to know your true self. In solitude, you can finally stop performing. Every day, we put on different faces, at work, at home, with friends, or in relationships. We play roles that often aren't truly reflective of who we are, and in the process, we lose touch with our authentic selves. We're so busy pleasing others, fitting into their expectations, that we forget what it feels like to just be. Solitude gives you the space to shed those roles, to take off the masks, and to explore who you are without the need for approval from others. There's power in that. There's a freedom in not having to be anything for anyone, in not having to fit into a mold or respond to someone else's needs. And through that freedom, you begin to realize something profound. The more you allow yourself to be truly you, without the need for validation, the more you come to know and appreciate your own worth. It's a self-discovery process that no one else can give you, no relationship can fill. This is where Carl Jung's concept of individuation comes into play. Individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are, not who the world wants you to be, not who you've been told to be, but who you are at your core. This process can't happen when you're constantly caught up in the expectations and judgments of others. It can't happen when you're always surrounded by people, relationships, or distractions. It can only happen when you're alone, when you have the time and space to sit with yourself, to question, to reflect, and to truly understand your own desires, fears, and passions. This doesn't mean rejecting relationships altogether. On the contrary, when you embrace solitude and learn to understand yourself fully, the relationships you enter into become healthier and more authentic. You stop looking for someone to complete you. Instead, you enter relationships with a sense of wholeness, knowing that you are already enough. And that's when you can truly experience the kind of love that is deep, balanced, and free from the need to fix or be fixed. Living alone doesn't just help you heal, it helps you transform. In those quiet moments when you're alone and fully present with yourself, the transformation begins. It's in solitude that you can dive deep into your unconscious mind, confront unresolved emotions, and start to heal from past wounds. You'll begin to uncover the parts of you that have been hidden, your true desires, your true values, your true potential. Yes, it can feel lonely or disorienting. But that's where the magic happens. It's in that rawness, in that vulnerability, that you start to break free from the patterns that have been holding you back. You stop reacting out of fear or insecurity, and you start living with intention. You begin to choose yourself over the expectations of others. And that's when you experience true peace and empowerment. So why is living alone better for your soul than any relationship? Because in solitude, you rediscover who you truly are. You reconnect with your essence, your authenticity, and your strength. It's in solitude that you stop relying on external sources for validation and start finding that validation from within. It's in solitude that you stop seeking someone to fill the emptiness, and instead, you realize that the emptiness was never truly there. It was just a space waiting to be filled with your own love, your own understanding, and your own peace. Once you've experienced the power of solitude, you'll find that you no longer need to chase relationships in the same way. You'll no longer feel incomplete without someone else. You'll know that you are enough. And that, my friend, is when the most meaningful, fulfilling relationships will find you, not because you need them to survive, but because you're ready to share your full, authentic self with another. Living alone helps build personal boundaries through experience, not theory. Most conversations about boundaries happen in relation to other people, but the foundation for setting limits doesn't come from reading or advice. It comes from noticing what drains you, what overwhelms you, and what feels right when no one is watching. That awareness grows naturally when you live alone. Without the presence of others influencing your time, energy, or attention, you start to understand your natural rhythms. You learn when you feel most focused, how much noise you can tolerate, how long you need to recover from overstimulation. You begin to notice the difference between real rest and distractions, and slowly, you realize how often you've ignored those signals in the past to maintain harmony in relationships. This experience gives you clear reference points. You no longer guess where your limits are, you've lived them. So when you return to shared environments, it's easier to notice when something crosses a line. It's not about confrontation or control. It's about knowing yourself well enough to decide what you will and won't accommodate. Living alone also removes the pressure to explain your choices constantly. You get used to acting based on what makes sense to you, not what's convenient for others. That builds confidence. It also reshapes the way you relate, not from a place of defensiveness, but from clarity. You're not avoiding people. You're simply aware of what you need in order to stay balanced. And that kind of awareness doesn't come from theory. It comes from practice. Quiet, consistent, uninterrupted practice. The kind that only solitude makes possible. Solitude strengthens small personal practices that regulate your mind. Most people think of solitude as something passive, time spent resting, doing nothing, or waiting for life to resume. But for those who live alone with intention, solitude becomes a space where small daily practices take root and grow. These routines aren't dramatic or complex, they're consistent, and over time they create structure and mental stability. You notice the impact of having full control over your time. You decide when the day begins, how it unfolds, and how it ends. There's no negotiation, no external pressure shaping your rhythm. This independence allows you to experiment with habits in a way that shared living rarely permits. You find out what actually works for you, not what's suggested, not what's convenient for others. Simple things like preparing a meal in silence, writing a few lines in a notebook, or setting aside 10 minutes before bed to sit quietly become more than routines. They become anchors. Without anyone interrupting or questioning the process, these habits develop naturally. You don't need to justify them. You just live them. Over time, these patterns start to stabilize your internal state. When your outer environment supports calm, your nervous system follows. You become more aware of your thoughts, less reactive to small disruptions, more attuned to what keeps you steady. You're not depending on motivation or mood. You're relying on repetition, clarity, and choice. These practices aren't reserved for perfect days. They're part of your normal life. And that's what gives them power. They don't require anyone else. They don't depend on anything outside of you. And once they're established, they stay with you, even when life around you changes. Living alone reshapes how you return to relationships. Time spent alone doesn't mean rejecting connection. It means returning to it with a different posture. After a long period of solitude, the way you approach relationships begins to shift. You no longer seek someone to fix your discomfort or give you direction. You already have both, not perfectly, but enough to stop outsourcing what's personal. You begin to notice patterns you used to ignore, how quickly you used to compromise, how easily you adapted to avoid tension. When you've lived alone long enough to know your preferences and boundaries, those tendencies don't resurface in the same way. You catch yourself earlier. You question choices more honestly. You take longer to commit, and you listen more closely to how your body responds around others. This doesn't make you colder. It makes you more intentional. You enter relationships by choice, not by habit or pressure. You don't over-explain your needs because you've practiced honoring them on your own. You're not testing people to see if they'll meet you halfway. You're observing whether your values align without forcing compatibility. The time spent alone also removes urgency. You don't feel rushed to fill space or avoid silence. You've already lived with both. That makes your presence calmer, your expectations clearer, and your decisions more grounded. You're no longer hoping someone will give you what you lack. You're paying attention to whether connection adds meaning without subtracting stability. Living alone doesn't guarantee better relationships, but it changes the criteria. And when the criteria change, the outcomes tend to follow. Living with someone else, whether in a romantic relationship, with family, or even roommates, inevitably requires compromise. That's part of coexistence. But when compromise becomes constant, it starts to reshape you in ways that aren't always obvious at first. You adapt your routines, shift your preferences, and moderate your reactions to keep the peace or meet expectations. What begins as small adjustments can, over time, lead to a quiet disconnect from your own priorities. Most of this happens subtly. You eat at a different time than you would on your own. You avoid activities that might seem selfish. You hesitate before making certain decisions, checking how they might affect someone else. There's a level of vigilance that becomes second nature. Eventually, your day isn't fully yours. Your space feels slightly misaligned, and the things that bring you back to yourself start to fade. Living alone removes that pressure. It allows you to act without constant second-guessing. You choose how your space is used, how your time is structured, and how your energy is spent. You don't have to compromise on small comforts or filter your thoughts to maintain harmony. This doesn't mean you stop being considerate. It means you stop bending in every direction to avoid conflict. In solitude, you begin to see which parts of you were shaped by shared environments and which parts remain when no one else is in the room. That contrast is valuable. It reveals where you've been negotiating too much and reminds you of what it feels like to live without constant adjustment. And that awareness doesn't go away, even when you return to shared spaces later on. When you live alone, every decision comes back to you. There's no one else influencing your schedule, your environment, or the way your day unfolds. That kind of autonomy doesn't just offer freedom, it reveals patterns. You begin to notice what you reach for when no one else is watching, what you prioritize when no one else is involved, how you use your time when you're not reacting to someone else's needs. This doesn't require a plan or a system. The clarity comes from repetition. You find out how much rest you actually need, how you like to start your mornings, what kinds of routines make you feel focused and steady. You also notice the areas where you've been acting out of habit or social expectation. doing things not because they matter to you, but because they've always been part of a shared routine. Living alone gives you space to remove what isn't working. You can let go of time fillers and activities that never felt aligned. You also start investing more in the things that hold real value for you, even if they're quiet, solitary, or unremarkable to others. Whether it's reading more, exercising at your own pace, or simply having longer windows of silence, these choices begin to reflect something deeper, a life shaped from the inside out. That kind of alignment is harder to find when you're constantly adjusting to external rhythms. On your own, you start to organize your life around what sustains you, not what entertains, distracts, or impresses. And that shift stays with you, even if your circumstances change later on. The real value of living alone isn't found in the silence itself. It's in what the silence allows. Without constant input from others, you begin to notice patterns that were previously covered up by routine interaction. You respond more deliberately, make choices with less noise around them, and experience a steadier sense of direction. There's no need to filter your reactions or accommodate a shared emotional environment. You learn to act based on what aligns with your energy and attention, not based on pressure or performance. Over time, this develops into a quiet consistency, not because life gets easier, but because your inner responses stop depending on external circumstances. Living alone also brings structure that reflects your own rhythm. It clarifies how much time you need, how you recover from stress, and how you function when no one else is influencing your mood. That structure becomes a foundation, one that doesn't shift every time your surroundings change. This isn't about turning away from connection. It's about having a relationship with yourself that doesn't disappear when someone else enters the picture. What solitude offers is a stable point of reference. Not perfection, not certainty, but enough space to move through life without losing yourself in it. And when connection does return, it no longer defines you. It becomes something you add to a life that already holds its shape. Thank you for watching. If this brought you clarity or made you reflect, consider subscribing to the channel.